Imagine a moment where honor is trampled, a sacred symbol of sacrifice torn away in a heartbeat. Now picture justice storming through the door, clad in the proud uniform of a nation's defender. This is the story of a veteran's dignity defiled and the unstoppable force of family and honor that answered the call. Stick with us to the end, and if you believe some things are worth defending, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for endless stories, because these tales of courage never stop. If you're moved by stories of valor, loyalty, and the fight for what's right, join our Endless Stories community. Subscribe now, share this video, and comment honor stands to show you're with us. Let's dive into this unforgettable tale. The Willow Creek Mall in Omaha, Nebraska, pulsed with the chaos of a Saturday afternoon. Families swarmed the food court, trays clattering over the din of conversation. Teenagers loitered near the arcade, their laughter sharp and fleeting, while pop music thumped from overhead speakers, a relentless beat vibrating the polished tiles. At 73, Henry Hank Sullivan moved through the crowd like a shadow, his worn cowboy boots scuffing softly, out of sync with the mall's frenetic energy. His face, etched with lines from decades under the sun and the weight of war, carried a quiet intensity, gray eyes scanning the world with the vigilance of a man who'd never quite left the battlefield. Pinned to his faded denim jacket was a single bronze star, its muted shine a stark reminder of a scorching day in Fallujah, 2004, when he dragged 2 wounded Marines from a burning Humvee under sniper fire. Today was the anniversary of that ambush, and as he did every year, Hank wore the medal, not for glory, but to honor Private Tommy Ramirez, the one Marine who didn't make it home. Hank wasn't here for attention. His old sneakers, patched with duct tape after years of trudging across his small farm, were giving out, the soles so thin they barely cushioned the arthritis in his knees, scarred from shrapnel. He needed new shoes, something sturdy to ease the ache that flared with every Nebraska storm. He headed to Step Savvy, a sprawling sporting goods chain at the mall's north end. Its neon signs and aggressive sales pitches a far cry from the quiet fields he called home. The store's bright lights and thumping hip-hop felt like an assault, but Hank ignored it, navigating aisles of flashy sneakers to find a pair of plain black walking shoes. He tested them with a few steps, nodded to himself, and made his way to the checkout. Behind the counter, Tyler Grayson, a 21-year-old clerk with a crooked name tag and a permanent smirk, barely looked up from his phone. Tyler was a local, raised on high school football and dreams of TikTok fame. His job at Step Savvy a pit stop to something better. Old guys like Hank, with their worn clothes and slow movements, were just background noise. Hank set the shoes on the counter. $79.99, Tyler muttered, scanning the barcode without eye contact, his fingers drumming impatiently. As Hank reached for his wallet, Tyler's gaze snagged on the bronze star, its dull gleam catching the fluorescent light. His lip curled. Yo, what's that? Some thrift store bling? Hank's hand paused, his breath catching. The mall's noise faded to a dull hum, the world narrowing to the clerk's sneering face. It's a bronze star, he said, voice low but firm, each word weighted with years of sacrifice. Earned it in Iraq. Tyler scoffed, leaning forward, his eyes glinting with misplaced confidence. Yeah, right, Grandpa. Looks like a cheap prop. We got a vibe to keep here, clean, professional. That thing's gotta go. Hank's jaw tightened, a flicker of anger stirring in his chest, the kind he hadn't felt since the war. This medal's no thing, son, he said, his tone steady but edged with steel. Men died for what it stands for. Tyler, mistaking Hank's restraint for weakness, rolled his eyes. Whatever, man. Rules are rules. No weird pins allowed. He reached across the counter, fingers brushing the metal's edge. Hank stepped back, his hand rising instinctively to shield it. Don't, he growled, a command that once silenced chaos in combat, its weight honed by years of leading men through hell. But Tyler, fueled by boredom and a sense of untouchability, didn't back down. He lunged, quick and careless, yanking the bronze star free. The pin tore through Hank's jacket, leaving a jagged gash. The metal clattered onto the counter, its dull thud louder than the store's music. Problem solved? Tyler sneered, flicking it back toward Hank like it was a discarded bottle cap. "Now, you buying these shoes or what?" Hank stared at the metal, his vision blurring with a fury he thought he'd buried decades ago. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from a violation so deep it cut through years of stoic calm. Shoppers nearby froze, some whispering, others staring with nervous curiosity, but none stepped forward. The air felt thick, charged, as if the world held its breath. Hank's fingers closed around the bronze star, its edges biting into his palm. His voice, when he spoke, was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of a vow. "You'll regret that." Without another word, he turned and walked out, the torn jacket flapping against his chest, a silent wound. Outside, he sank onto a bench by the mall's fountain, the bronze star clutched in his hand. The gurgle of water and chatter of passers-by blurred into static. All he could see was Tyler's smirk, the rip of fabric, the metal hitting the counter. It wasn't just an object. It was Tommy Ramirez's last breath, the screams of his squad, the blood on his hands as he pulled them to safety. His chest ached, the pain sharper than any shrapnel scar. Hank's eyes burned, but he didn't cry. Marines didn't cry. They acted, and something told him this wasn't over. Hank Sullivan sat on the bench by the Willow Creek Mall's fountain, the bronze star gripped tightly in his calloused hand. The water's rhythmic gurgle and the chatter of shoppers, kids begging for ice cream, couples bickering over sales, blurred into a distant hum. His world had narrowed to the weight of the metal, its edges worn smooth by years of quiet reverence. All he could see was Tyler's smirk, the violent tug, the tear in his jacket. It wasn't just fabric that had ripped. It was a piece of his soul, tied to the memory of Private Tommy Ramirez, whose screams still haunted Hank's dreams. His chest tightened, the pain sharper than the shrapnel scars on his knees. A wound reopened by a careless kid who'd never known the cost of war. Hank's fingers, trembling with a mix of rage and violation, fumbled for his ancient flip phone, a relic he barely used. His first instinct was to call the police. Assault, theft, even if temporary, Tyler's act deserved consequences. But what would a cop do? Slap the kid with a fine? Write a report that had gathered dust? It felt hollow, inadequate for the insult to Tommy's memory, to every soldier who'd bled beside him. Then his mind turned to his son, Nathan Sullivan, a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army, stationed at Fort Carson, Colorado, just a 2-hour drive from Omaha. Nathan was Hank's mirror, fierce, disciplined, forged in the same fire. But he'd climbed higher, a rising star with a chest full of ribbons, including his own bronze star from Afghanistan. They hadn't spoken much lately, Hank's stubborn silence and Nathan's relentless career building a quiet wall between them. But blood was blood, and Nathan understood the weight of a medal, the unspoken code that bound those who'd served. Hank flipped open the phone, his breath uneven, and dialed. Nathan answered on the first ring, his voice crisp, professional, the kind that commanded attention.
Colonel Sullivan.
Hank swallowed hard, the tremor in his own voice betraying him. "Nate, it's Dad." A beat of silence stretched across the line, and when Nathan spoke again, his tone softened, sensing the crack in his father's armor. "Dad? You okay? What's wrong?" Hank recounted the incident in halting words, each one heavy with raw emotion. The step-savvy store, the smug clerk, the mockery of his bronze star as a cheap prop, the violent tug that tore it from his jacket. He didn't embellish, he didn't need to. The facts burned bright enough. "He ripped it off, Nate," Hank said, his voice breaking. "Called it trash. Threw it back like it was nothing." The line went quiet, a charged pause that felt like the calm before a thunderstorm. When Nathan spoke, his voice was low, cold, and sharp as a blade, the kind that made subordinates snap to attention and enemies rethink their choices. "Where are you, Dad?" "Exact location." Hank's grip on the phone tightened, his eyes fixed on the fountain spray. Willow Creek Mall, step-savvy, the bench by the main entrance fountain. "It happened maybe 10 minutes ago." Nathan's reply came swift and unyielding, each word a promise carved in stone. "Stay there, Dad. Don't move. I'm coming." and I'm not coming alone. The call ended with a click, abrupt and final. Hank leaned back, the phone still clutched in his hand, its plastic warm against his palm. Not coming alone? The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. He didn't know what Nathan meant, but he knew his son. Nathan didn't make idle promises. When he moved, mountains shook. Hank's eyes drifted to the bronze star, its surface catching the late afternoon light. He traced its edges, remembering the weight of Tommy's body as he dragged him from the Humvee, the heat of flames licking his skin. The metal wasn't just metal. It was a vow to never forget. He pinned it back to his torn jacket, his fingers steadier now, fueled by a spark of anticipation. The rage was still there, a smoldering fire, but it was tempered by a growing certainty. Something was coming, and it would be big. Around him, the mall carried on, oblivious. A teenager snapped a photo of Hank, mistaking him for a quirky old man, while a woman whispered to her friend, pointing at his torn jacket. Hank ignored them, his focus inward. His heart pounded, not with fear, but with the same resolve that had carried him through Fallujah's streets. He wasn't just a tired farmer or a forgotten vet. He was a Marine, and Marines didn't back down. He glanced at the step-savvy entrance, its neon sign mocking him from across the concourse. Tyler was in there, probably laughing, thinking he'd won. Hank's jaw clenched. The kid had no idea what he'd unleashed. 2 hours away, on a sun-scorched stretch of I-80, a black SUV roared toward Omaha, its tires humming with urgency. Nathan Sullivan was already planning, his mind a steel trap. His father wasn't just any veteran. Hank Sullivan was a legend, a man who'd carried wounded men through hell and never spoke of it. The thought of some punk clerk defiling his bronze star lit a fire in Nathan's chest, one that wouldn't be quenched by words alone. This wasn't just about Hank. It was about every soldier who'd ever stood in the line of fire, and Nathan was bringing the full weight of that legacy with him. Inside Step Savvy, the air buzzed with the usual Saturday chaos. Sneakers squeaking on polished floors, cash registers beeping, kids begging for the latest Air Jordans. Tyler Grayson leaned on the counter, scrolling through Instagram, his smirk unshaken as he recounted his clash with the crazy old guy to a coworker, Jake, who laughed along. "Dude, he acted like that pin was the holy grail or something," Tyler said, shaking his head. The store was a hive of activity, parents snapping up back-to-school deals, gym bros testing running shoes, none of them aware of the storm brewing just beyond the mall's glass doors. Tyler, oblivious, posted a selfie with a caption. "Another day, another weirdo. #retail-life. He had no idea the world he'd mocked was about to crash down on him. Outside, the Willow Creek Mall's fountain sprayed mist into the late afternoon sun, casting fleeting rainbows over the concourse. Hank Sullivan sat on his bench, the bronze star pinned defiantly to his torn denim jacket. The rage that had surged when Tyler ripped the metal free still simmered, but it was now laced with a quiet resolve. Nathan's voice echoed in his mind. "I'm not coming alone." Hank didn't know what his son had planned, but the words carried the weight of a promise forged in shared sacrifice. He stared at the step-savvy entrance, its neon sign taunting him. The kid inside thought he'd won, thought he could disrespect a Marine's honor and walk away. Hank's fingers tightened around the bench's edge. He'd been through too much. Fallujah, Ramadi, the long nights haunted by Tommy Ramirez's face, to let this stand. 2 hours away, a black SUV tore down I-80, its engine growling under the Nebraska sky. Lieutenant Colonel Nathan Sullivan sat in the passenger seat, his class a uniform pristine, olive green coat, gold braid, and a chest heavy with ribbons, his own bronze star gleaming among them. His face was a mask of controlled fury, hazel eyes locked on the horizon like a predator tracking prey. Beside him, Sergeant Major Carla Ruiz, a 20-year veteran with a glare that could halt a tank, drove with relentless precision, her hands steady on the wheel. In the back, Master Sergeant Jamal Carter, a towering figure with a silver star from Kandahar, checked his phone for traffic updates, his jaw set. They'd been at a Fort Carson ceremony, pinning medals on young soldiers, when Nathan got Hank's call. He'd stepped away, listened, and returned with fire in his eyes. "My father's been disrespected," he'd said, voice low. That was all Ruiz and Carter needed. They were in the SUV within minutes, uniforms on, ready to march into battle. Not with guns, but with the unyielding weight of their presence. Nathan's mind churned as the miles blurred past. His father wasn't just any veteran. Hank Sullivan was a legend in their family, a man who'd carried wounded Marines through hell and never spoke of it, who'd taught Nathan the meaning of duty before he could spell it. The thought of some punk clerk, some kid who'd never known the smell of cordite or the weight of a dying friend, defiling Hank's Bronze Star ignited a fury Nathan hadn't felt since his last tour. He glanced at Ruiz, her knuckles white on the wheel, then at Carter, whose silence was a vow of loyalty. This wasn't just about Hank. It was about every soldier who'd bled for the flag, every medal earned in fire and loss. Nathan's voice broke the quiet. "We're not just fixing this for Dad. We're sending a message." Ruiz nodded, her eyes never leaving the road. "Damn right, sir." Carter's deep voice rumbled from the back. "No one disrespects a Marine. Not on our watch." Back at the mall, Hank felt the weight of eyes on him. A teenager snapped a photo, mistaking him for a quirky old man, while a woman whispered to her friend, pointing at his torn jacket. Hank ignored them, his focus inward. His heart pounded, not with fear, but with the same resolve that had carried him through Fallujah's dust-choked streets. He wasn't just a tired farmer, not just a forgotten vet. He was a Marine, and Marines didn't fold. The fountain's mist cooled his face, but it couldn't douse the fire in his chest. He glanced at his watch. 10 minutes had passed since Nathan's call, maybe 12. Whatever was coming, it was close. The SUV was now just 30 minutes out, weaving through traffic with a purpose that ignored speed limits. Nathan's phone buzzed, a text from a Fort Carson contact who'd heard about the incident through the grapevine. "Need backup?" Nathan typed back. "Got it covered. Stay ready." He didn't need more bodies. Ruiz and Carter were a force unto themselves. But he wanted the word out. Let the Army know. Let the veterans know. This wasn't just a family matter. It was a stand for every service member who'd ever pinned a medal to their chest. Nathan's jaw clenched as he pictured the clerk's smirk, the kind of arrogance that thrived on ignorance. He'd seen it before, on recruits who didn't yet understand, on civilians who thought war was a movie. But this kid had crossed a line, and Nathan was going to redraw it in steel. Hank shifted on the bench, his eyes flicking to the step-savvy entrance. A young couple walked out, bags swinging, laughing about something trivial. He envied their lightness, their freedom from the ghosts he carried. But he wouldn't trade his scars, not for anything. They were proof he'd stood for something bigger, something Tyler would never grasp. Hank's hand brushed the Bronze Star, its edges a map of survival. He didn't know what Nathan was bringing, but he knew it would be enough. The air felt heavier now, charged with the promise of reckoning. The mall's clock ticked on, each second pulling the storm closer. The step-savvy store was a whirlwind of Saturday noise. Sneakers squeaking, cash registers chiming, and kids whining for the flashiest kicks. Tyler Grayson lounged at the checkout, trading jabs with his coworker Jake about the nutty old guy who'd stormed out. "Bet he's still crying over his fake pin," Tyler chuckled, oblivious to the shift in the air. Shoppers bustled around him, snagging back-to-school deals, their chatter drowning out the pop music's thump. Outside, the Willow Creek Mall's glass doors caught the fading afternoon light, a deceptive calm before the reckoning. Tyler, scrolling through his phone, didn't notice the hush that began to spread from the entrance, a ripple of silence that swallowed the store's din. Hank Sullivan sat on his bench by the fountain, the Bronze Star pinned defiantly to his torn denim jacket. The rage from Tyler's violation still burned, but it was now tempered by a steely anticipation. Nathan's words, "I'm not coming alone," looped in his mind, a promise that felt like the prelude to a storm. He didn't know what his son was bringing, but he knew Nathan's resolve. When he acted, worlds shifted. Hank's eyes flicked to the step-savvy entrance, its neon glow mocking him across the concourse. The kid inside thought he'd won, thought he could spit on a Marine's honor and walk away. Hank's fingers gripped the bench, his jaw tight. He'd faced worse than a punk clerk. Insurgents, ambushes, the weight of loss. But this cut deeper. A personal desecration of Tommy Ramirez's memory. Inside the store, the atmosphere changed abruptly. The pop music seemed tinny, the chatter fading as shoppers turned toward the entrance. A low murmur spread, punctuated by gasps. Tyler looked up, annoyed by the sudden quiet, and froze. His smirk vanished, replaced by a flicker of fear as three figures marched through the doors. Their presence a force that parted the crowd like water. Lieutenant Colonel Nathan Sullivan led the way, his class a uniform gleaming under the store's fluorescence. Olive green coat, gold braid, and a chest heavy with ribbons, his bronze star catching the light. His colonel's eagles shone on his shoulders. His hazel eyes locked on Tyler with a predator's focus. Flanking him were Sergeant Major Carla Ruiz, her glare sharp enough to cut steel, and Master Sergeant Jamal Carter, his massive frame radiating menace. They didn't walk. They advanced, their polished boots striking the tiles in unison, each step a declaration of intent. The crowd gaped, phones raised to capture the moment, whispers rippling. Is that a general? What's happening? Tyler's hands twitched, his eyes darting for an escape that didn't exist. Nathan stopped at the counter, his presence filling the space like a physical weight. Ruiz and Carter stood just behind, their unyielding stares boxing Tyler in, cutting off any retreat. The store was dead silent, every eye on the confrontation. Nathan's voice, when he spoke, was low, controlled, but carried the weight of command, each word a hammer strike. You're the clerk who assaulted a veteran and tore a bronze star from his chest 20 minutes ago. It wasn't a question. It was a verdict. Tyler's mouth opened, but no sound came. His face paled, his earlier bravado crumbling under Nathan's gaze. He managed a weak nod, his hands trembling on the counter. Nathan leaned closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that somehow carried to the back of the store. That veteran is my father, Henry Sullivan, United States Marine Corps, retired. A man who risked his life for this country while you were still in diapers. The words landed like blows, stripping away Tyler's confidence. Shoppers gasped, some nodding in approval, others filming with shaky hands. Nathan's eyes never wavered, his stare a weapon honed by years of leadership in chaos. The store manager, Greg Larson, a sweaty man in a cheap polo, hurried over, wringing his hands. He'd been alerted by a cashier who'd seen the uniformed trio enter, her panicked whisper about an army general, spurring him into action. Colonel, sir, I'm so sorry. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. Nathan silenced him with a glance that could freeze fire, its intensity making Larson step back. No misunderstanding, Mr. Larson, Nathan said, his voice steady but laced with contempt. Your employee committed an act of assault and desecrated a military decoration. That's not a mistake. That's a disgrace. Tyler's knees buckled, his voice a pathetic squeak. I didn't know it was real. Nathan cut him off, his tone sharp as a blade. You didn't care. That metal represents blood, sacrifice, lives lost. You called it a prop. You tore it from his chest like it was trash. The store's silence deepened, the weight of Nathan's words hanging heavy. A woman in the crowd wiped her eyes, clutching her husband's arm. A teenager lowered his phone, his smirk replaced by awe. Nathan's gaze bore into Tyler, unrelenting. You're going to apologize to my father. Now. Outside, Hank rose from the bench, signaled by a mall security guard who'd spotted Nathan's arrival. His heart pounded as he walked toward Stepsavvy, the bronze star gleaming on his torn jacket. The crowd parted for him, their whispers now tinged with respect, not curiosity. He stepped through the doors, his boots heavy on the tiles, and stopped beside Nathan. The sight of his son, tall, commanding, the embodiment of everything Hank had fought for, steadied him. Tyler's eyes flicked to Hank, wide with panic. Nathan's voice sliced through the tension. Look at him, the man you disrespected. Speak. The storm had arrived, and there was no escaping it. The air in Stepsavvy was thick, the silence so absolute that the faint hum of the store's air conditioning seemed to roar. Shoppers stood frozen, phones still raised, capturing the scene unfolding at the checkout counter. Lieutenant Colonel Nathan Sullivan towered over Tyler Grayson, his class a uniform a beacon of authority, his colonel's eagles glinting under the fluorescent lights. Sergeant Major Carla Ruiz and Master Sergeant Jamal Carter flanked him, their unyielding stares pinning Tyler like a bug under glass. The clerk's earlier smirk was gone, his face pale, eyes wide with the dawning realization that he'd crossed a line no one could uncross. Nathan's voice, low and sharp as a bayonet, cut through the tension. "Look at him, the man you disrespected. Apologize. Now." Hank Sullivan stood beside his son, his weathered frame steady despite the storm raging within. The bronze star, repinned to his torn denim jacket, caught the light, a silent testament to Fallujah, to Tommy Ramirez, to every scar he carried. The crowd parted around him, their whispers now heavy with respect, some recognizing the weight of the moment. Hank's gray eyes met Tyler's, hard but not cruel, carrying the quiet dignity of a man who'd faced death and won. His heart pounded, not from anger, but from the sight of Nathan, his boy now a force of nature, standing up for him, for the code they both lived by. The torn jacket hung like a battle flag, its gash a wound that demanded justice. Tyler's mouth worked soundlessly, his hands trembling on the counter. Under the combined weight of Nathan's command, Ruiz's piercing glare, and Carter's looming presence, his bravado crumbled like dry sand. He looked at Hank, his voice a pathetic squeak, barely audible over the crowd's held breath. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean." Nathan's eyes narrowed, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl that echoed through the store. "Louder. Mean it." Tyler swallowed hard, his face ashen, sweat beading on his forehead. He forced himself to meet Hank's gaze, his words shaky but clearer now. "I'm sorry, Mr. Sullivan. I was wrong. I didn't know what the medal meant. I shouldn't have touched it." Hank held Tyler's stare, his expression unyielding but not vengeful. He'd seen fear before, on recruits, on enemies, on himself in the mirror after Fallujah. This kid was scared, but fear alone wasn't enough. "You don't touch a man's honor," Hank said, his voice quiet but resonant, carrying the weight of decades. "Not ever." The words landed softly but hit like a hammer, drawing murmurs of agreement from the crowd. A woman in a red sweater nodded, her eyes wet, while a burly man in a husker's cap muttered, "Damn right." Tyler flinched, his shoulders slumping, the last of his defiance snuffed out. Nathan turned to Greg Larson, the store manager, who hovered nearby, wringing his hands, his cheap polo soaked with sweat. Larson had been scrambling since the uniformed trio stormed in, his mind racing with visions of corporate fallout. "Colonel, sir, we'll make this right, I swear." Nathan cut him off with a look that could shatter granite, its intensity forcing Larson to step back. "Mr. Larson," Nathan said, his voice steady but laced with contempt. "My father came here to buy shoes. Those will be complimentary, along with a lifetime discount at every Step-Savvy location. And you're going to explain, right now, what you're doing to ensure no veteran, no customer, is ever treated like this again." Larson nodded frantically, his words tumbling out.
Absolutely, Colonel.
"We'll fire him, retrain the staff, implement new policies, whatever you need. This won't happen again." His eyes darted to Tyler, who shrank further, the reality of his job hanging by a thread sinking in. Nathan's hand rested on Hank's shoulder, a rare gesture of warmth that grounded them both. "Dad, let's get your shoes," he said, his voice softening for the first time. "Then I'm taking you to Charlie's Steakhouse. Best ribeye in Omaha." Hank nodded, a flicker of pride breaking through his stoic mask. The crowd parted as they moved toward the shoe aisles, their steps steady, a father and son united. Ruiz and Carter remained at the counter, their presence a silent warning. Ruiz's eyes bored into Tyler, who avoided her gaze, while Carter's massive frame ensured no one dared interrupt. The crowd erupted into murmurs, some clapping, others filming with renewed fervor. A young woman posted the video to X with the caption, "Justice for a vet. This is America. #honor stands." Hank felt a weight lift, not just from Tyler's apology, but from Nathan's unyielding defense. For the first time in years, he wasn't just a tired farmer or a forgotten Marine. He was seen, his sacrifice acknowledged, his honor upheld. Larson scrambled to fetch the shoes, his hands shaking as he boxed them up. He added 2 extra pairs, muttering apologies, his face red with panic. Tyler stood frozen, his world unraveling. The crowd's eyes followed Hank and Nathan, their respect palpable. An older man, wearing a Vietnam vet cap, approached Hank as he waited for the shoes. "Semper Fi, brother," he said, his voice thick. Hank nodded, their shared understanding needing no words. Nathan caught the exchange, his chest tightening. This was why he'd come, not just for his father, but for every veteran who'd ever been dismissed. As they headed toward the exit, shoes in hand, Nathan glanced back at Tyler, his gaze a final warning. "You're lucky my father's a better man than you," he said, his voice low but clear. Tyler nodded, mute, his dreams of TikTok fame now a distant memory. The store buzzed with renewed energy, shoppers whispering about the Army colonel, who'd shut down a punk clerk. Hank walked beside Nathan, the bronze star gleaming, its weight no longer a burden but a badge. The reckoning had come, and it was only the beginning. The Willow Creek Mall hummed with its usual Saturday rhythm, but inside Step Savvy, the air was electric, charged with the aftershocks of Nathan Sullivan's confrontation. Shoppers lingered, whispering about the Army colonel, who'd brought a punk clerk to his knees, their phones buzzing with videos and posts already spreading across X and TikTok. The hashtag honor stands trended locally, clips of Nathan's icy stare and Hank's quiet dignity racking up thousands of views. Tyler Grayson stood behind the counter, his face ashen, hands shaking as he avoided the stares of coworkers and customers. His smirk was gone, replaced by the sinking dread of a man who just torched his own future. Greg Larson, the store manager, was on the phone with corporate, his voice a frantic whisper as he tried to explain the PR nightmare unfolding under his watch. Hank Sullivan and his son, Lieutenant Colonel Nathan Sullivan, stepped out of Step Savvy, the box of complimentary shoes tucked under Hank's arm. The torn denim jacket still hung on his frame, the bronze star pinned defiantly to its chest, its gleam a quiet rebuke to the insult it had endured. Nathan's hand rested briefly on his father's shoulder, a gesture that spoke louder than words. The crowd parted for them, some nodding in respect, others snapping photos, their murmurs a mix of awe and admiration. Hank felt their eyes but kept his focus forward, his boots steady on the tiles. The weight of Tyler's violation lingered, but Nathan's defense, fierce, unyielding, had lifted something deeper, a burden Hank hadn't realized he'd carried for years. They headed to Charlie's Steakhouse, a local institution just a mile from the mall, its dark wood paneling and scent of sizzling ribeye a welcome contrast to the mall's neon chaos. The hostess, a young woman with a Nebraska twang, recognized Hank from a viral clip already circulating and ushered them to a prime booth, her smile warm. "On the house, sir," she said, nodding at Hank's medal. Hank grumbled, uncomfortable with the attention, but Nathan's quiet thanks smoothed the moment. They settled in, the clink of glasses and low hum of conversation wrapping around them like a shield. The ribeye was perfect, charred just right, but the real nourishment was the moment between father and son. Hank cut into his steak, his voice gruff. "You didn't have to do all that, Nate." Storming in like Patton. Nathan's lips twitched, a rare crack in his stoic facade. "Yes, I did, Dad. Some things you don't let slide. Not when it's family. Not when it's honor." Hank's eyes met his son's, a flicker of pride breaking through his weathered mask. They hadn't been close lately, the years and miles building a wall of silence. But today that wall crumbled. Over plates of steak and mashed potatoes they talked, really talked, for the first time in years. Hank shared a story about Fallujah, the heat of the Humvee's flames, Tommy Ramirez's last words. Nathan countered with a tale from Afghanistan, a night patrol gone wrong, his own bronze star earned in a blur of chaos. The words flowed, raw and unfiltered, stitching their bond back together. Back at Step Savvy, Tyler's world unraveled. Larson, after a tense call with the regional manager, fired him on the spot, citing gross misconduct. Corporate, smelling a PR disaster, issued a directive: immediate action to contain the fallout. By evening, Step Savvy's official X account posted a statement. We deeply regret the incident at our Willow Creek location. The employee has been terminated, and we're launching a nationwide Veterans Respect initiative to ensure this never happens again. The post gained traction, shared by veterans groups and local news outlets, but it didn't erase the videos of Tyler's sneer, now meme fodder with captions like, "When you mess with a vet and his son's a colonel." Tyler slunk out of the store, avoiding the glares of coworkers who'd once laughed at his jokes. Jake, his buddy, shook his head, muttering, "You're an idiot, man." Tyler's dreams of TikTok fame felt hollow, replaced by the sting of humiliation. He climbed into his beat-up Honda, the viral clips already haunting him. He didn't know it yet, but the incident would follow him, a lesson etched in digital permanence. At Charlie's, Hank and Nathan lingered over coffee, the booth a sanctuary. Hank pulled the bronze star from his jacket, holding it up to the light. "This was never about me," he said, voice low. "It's about Tommy, the others. You made sure they weren't forgotten." Nathan's throat tightened. "And you made sure I knew what duty means, Dad. Today was my turn to show it." Hank nodded, his eyes misty but steady. For the first time in years, he felt seen, not as a relic or a farmer, but as a Marine whose sacrifices still mattered. The mall incident was already rippling beyond Omaha. Veterans groups on Facebook shared the story, calling it a victory for every soldier. A local VFW post planned a meeting to discuss it, their commander texting members, "This is why we fight for respect." Nathan's phone buzzed with messages from Fort Carson. Colleagues, subordinates, even his CO, all praising his stand. Sergeant Major Ruiz and Master Sergeant Carter, back at base, recounted the showdown to awestruck troops, their roles in the mall now a badge of pride. The story wasn't just about Hank or Nathan. It was a spark, igniting something bigger. As they left Charlie's, Nathan walked Hank to his old pickup, the Nebraska dusk painting the sky in purples and golds. "You okay, Dad?" he asked, his voice soft. Hank clapped his son's shoulder, a rare gesture. "Better than okay, Nate. Thanks to you." Nathan smiled, the weight of the day settling into something like peace. The bronze star, tucked back in Hank's jacket, gleamed faintly, its story alive again. Tyler's mistake had been a match. Nathan's response was the fire, and that fire was spreading. The Willow Creek Mall returned to its usual rhythm by Monday, but the echo of Saturday's showdown lingered. Shoppers still whispered about the colonel who took down a clerk, their phones buzzing with viral clips of Nathan Sullivan's icy command and Hank Sullivan's quiet dignity. The hashtag honor stands climbed national trends on X, racking up millions of views as veterans, patriots, and everyday Americans shared the story. Step Savvy's corporate office scrambled to contain the fallout. Their Veterans Respect initiative announced in a glossy press release that hit every major news outlet. The incident wasn't just a local scandal anymore. It was a cultural moment, a spark that ignited debates about respect, sacrifice, and the divide between those who served and those who didn't. Hank Sullivan was back on his small Nebraska farm, the bronze star safely tucked in its velvet case on his dresser. The torn denim jacket hung in his closet, its gash a reminder he didn't need but couldn't discard. He'd returned to his routine, feeding the chickens, tending the corn, checking the fences, but something had shifted. Neighbors, usually content with a nod, stopped by with handshakes and stories of their own relatives' service. The local diner's owner, a gruff man named Earl, refused to let Hank pay for his coffee, muttering, "For what you did, Marine." Hank grumbled, uneasy with the attention, but the warmth in their eyes chipped away at his stoic shell. For the first time in years, he felt like more than a shadow of his past. The story had taken on a life of its own. Local news ran segments, dubbing Nathan the Colonel of Justice, while veterans groups rallied online, praising Step Savvy's swift response but demanding more. Better training, real accountability. VFW Post 412 in Omaha held an emergency meeting. Their commander, a Vietnam vet named Roy, slamming his fist on the table. "This is why we fight," he told the packed room. "One of ours got disrespected, and his son showed him what happens when you cross a Marine." Members cheered, sharing the story on Facebook, where it spread to posts across the Midwest. A GoFundMe for Hank popped up, titled, "Support a Hero," though he quietly asked it be redirected to a VA clinic. StepSavvy stock took a brief hit, but rebounded as their initiative gained traction. Corporate sent Hank a formal apology letter, signed by the CEO, along with a $5,000 gift card he didn't want. He donated it to the Omaha VA, where a nurse told him it'd buy new wheelchairs for vets. The mall itself responded, erecting a small bronze plaque near the fountain. "In honor of veterans, inspired by Henry Sullivan's Stand, 2025. Hank's name was subtle, etched in fine print, but it drew visitors, vets leaving coins, families snapping photos. Hank avoided the mall, but Nathan sent him a picture of the plaque, his text simple. "You did this, Dad." Nathan, back at Fort Carson, carried the incident like a badge. His commanding officer, a grizzled general, pulled him aside. "Good work, Sullivan. You reminded us what the uniform means." Nathan nodded, but his thoughts were on Hank. He'd always admired his father, but seeing him stand tall despite Tyler's insult, proud, unbroken, had deepened his respect. Sergeant Major Carla Ruiz and Master Sergeant Jamal Carter, now legends among the ranks, recounted the mall showdown to wide-eyed troops. "We didn't say a word," Carter told a mess hall crowd. "Didn't have to. The colonel's eyes said it all." Ruiz smirked, adding, "That clerk's still shaking." Their presence at the mall was now a story told with pride, a testament to loyalty. Tyler Grayson, meanwhile, was a ghost. Fired from StepSavvy, he left Willow Creek, taking a job pumping gas in a neighboring town. The viral videos haunted him, his sneering face plastered across memes with captions like, "Don't mess with vets." Friends distanced themselves, and his TikTok account, once his pride, went silent. In quiet moments, alone in his car, he searched Bronze Star online, reading about men like Hank, about Fallujah's hell. It was a slow awakening, one he'd never admit, but the weight of his mistake pressed harder each day. Hank noticed the change in his community. Kids from the local 4-H club, usually shy, asked to hear about Iraq, their eyes wide as he described the Humvee's flames. He kept it simple, focusing on teamwork, duty, leaving out the blood. Their awe stirred something in him, a sense of purpose he'd thought lost. At the diner, a young waitress, her dad a Gulf War vet, slipped him a note. "Thank you for standing up." Hank folded it carefully, tucking it beside the Bronze Star's case. Nathan visited that weekend, the two sitting on Hank's porch as the sun dipped low, painting the cornfields gold. Over beers they talked, not as colonel and vet but as father and son. "I was angry," Nathan admitted, staring at the horizon. "But I was scared too. Scared I wouldn't do enough for you." Hank clapped his shoulder, his grip firm. "You did more than enough, Nate. You made him see." The stars emerged, a silent witness to their bond, rebuilt stronger than ever. The story's ripples kept spreading. A national veterans group invited Hank to speak, but he declined, suggesting Nathan instead. Nathan addressed a packed hall in Denver, his voice steady. "This isn't about me or my dad," he said. "It's about every veteran who's ever been dismissed. Respect isn't optional." The crowd roared, many in tears. Back home, Hank watched the speech on his old TV, a rare smile breaking through. The Bronze Star, once a private tribute, was now a beacon, its story waking a nation to the cost of honor. The story of Hank and Nathan Sullivan had outgrown the Willow Creek Mall, morphing into a legend that pulsed through Omaha and beyond. By spring, it was more than a viral moment. It was a movement, shared in VFW halls, dissected on veteran podcasts, and taught in military ethics classes. On X, #HonorStands became a rallying cry, with users posting photos of their own medals alongside stories of service. StepSavvy leaned hard into their Veterans Respect initiative, their stores now adorned with plaques honoring local vets, their profits soaring as they rebranded as a veteran-friendly chain. The incident wasn't just news anymore. It was a mirror, forcing America to confront how it treated those who'd served. Hank Sullivan, back on his Nebraska farm, felt the change in the air. His daily routine, feeding chickens, mending fences, sipping coffee at Earl's Diner, remained the same, but the world around him had shifted. Neighbors who'd once offered only a nod now lingered, asking about Fallujah, sharing tales of their own kin who'd served. The diner's regulars, a mix of farmers and truckers, started calling him Sarge, a nickname Hank accepted with a gruff nod. A barista at the mall's coffee kiosk, a college kid with a nose ring, refused his money one day, whispering, "For your service, sir." Hank muttered a protest but took the free coffee, his heart warmed by the unexpected respect. The Bronze Star stayed in its velvet case, but its story followed him, a quiet glow that made him stand a little taller. The mall itself had become a pilgrimage site. The bronze plaque by the fountain, inscribed with Hank's name in fine print, drew veterans from across the Midwest. They left coins, dog tags, even handwritten notes. Semper Fi, never forgotten. Families posed for photos, kids tracing the plaque's letters, asking parents what veteran meant. Hank avoided the mall, uncomfortable with the spotlight, but Nathan sent him updates, including a photo of a Vietnam vet saluting the plaque, tears in his eyes. Hank pinned the photo to his fridge, next to a faded picture of him and Nathan at a fishing hole, both grinning. The past and present were knitting together, and it felt right. Nathan, at Fort Carson, carried the story into his leadership. Promoted to full colonel, he mentored young officers, using the mall incident to teach respect for those who came before. "A medal isn't jewelry," he told a room of lieutenants, his voice steady. "It's a debt we owe." His troops nodded, some Googling Hank's name later, awestruck by the quiet Marine who'd sparked it all. Sergeant Major Carla Ruiz and Master Sergeant Jamal Carter, now retired, joined veterans advocacy groups, their roles in the showdown a badge of pride. At a Denver VA event, Ruiz recounted the mall scene to a cheering crowd, her smirk sharp. "That clerk didn't know what hit him." Carter, beside her, chuckled. "Still don't think he does." Step Savvy's transformation was relentless. Their Veterans Respect initiative became a model, with Walmart and Target launching similar programs, fearing their own PR disasters. Step Savvy's CEO flew to Omaha, unveiling a scholarship fund for veterans' kids, the press conference packed with cameras. Hank declined an invite to attend, but Nathan went, shaking hands, his uniform a magnet for attention. "This is about more than one day," he told reporters. "It's about every day we choose to honor sacrifice." The crowd clapped, and Step Savvy's stock ticked up, their rebrand a masterclass in corporate redemption. Tyler Grayson was a footnote now, working the night shift at a gas station in Fremont, 30 miles from Omaha. The viral memes, his panicked face captioned, "When you mess with a vet," still stung, popping up on his feeds like ghosts. His old friends had ghosted him, his TikTok account deleted after trolls flooded it with hate. Alone in his car, he read about the Bronze Star, about Fallujah's brutal streets, about men like Hank who carried scars most never saw. He didn't tell anyone, but the knowledge changed him, a seed of regret taking root. He kept a low profile, hoping the world would forget. It wouldn't. Hank's community kept evolving. The local 4-H club invited him to speak, their leader citing his stand as an example of courage. Hank, reluctant but roped in by a neighbor's plea, faced a room of wide-eyed kids. He told them about teamwork, about keeping promises, skipping the blood and fire. One boy, whose dad was deployed, asked, "Were you scared?" Hank paused, then nodded. "Every day, son. But you do what's right anyway." The kid beamed, and Hank felt a spark of purpose, one he hadn't known he'd lost. Nathan visited more often, their bond tighter than ever. One evening, on Hank's porch, beers in hand, they watched the sunset paint the cornfields gold. "You started something, Dad?" Nathan said, his voice soft. "People are listening now." Hank shrugged, but his eyes were bright. "You're the one who made 'em listen, Nate." They clinked bottles, the stars emerging above, a silent nod to their shared fight. The Bronze Star, in its case, was no longer just a memory. It was a call, answered by a son, a community, a nation. The story's reach grew. A veteran podcaster, with 500,000 listeners, dedicated an episode to Hank, calling him the Marine who reminded us what matters. Reddit threads dissected the incident, users debating respect versus entitlement. Schools added it to civics lessons, teachers asking students, "What would you do?" Hank, unaware of most of it, kept farming, but the letters started arriving. Dozens, then hundreds, from vets across the country, thanking him for standing tall. He read each one, his hands steady, the weight of their words heavier than any metal. A year after the Willow Creek Mall incident, Hank Sullivan stood at the edge of an Omaha Veterans Day ceremony, the November chill biting through his mended denim jacket. The Bronze Star, pinned to his chest for the occasion, gleamed under the gray sky, its weight both burden and badge. The city park was packed, veterans in faded caps, families waving small flags, kids clutching balloons that bobbed in the wind. A stage held local dignitaries, their speeches drowned by the hum of a crowd honoring those who'd served. Hank hadn't wanted to come, uneasy with crowds and praise, but Nathan had insisted, his voice firm yet warm. "This is bigger than us, Dad. They need to see you." So Hank stood, his boots planted, Nathan beside him in full class uniform, a colonel's eagles shining. The story of Hank and Nathan Sullivan had become a touchstone, woven into the fabric of Omaha and beyond. It wasn't just a viral clip anymore. It was a legend, retold in VFW halls, shared on veteran podcasts, and printed in op-eds about respect for service. The hashtag #HonorStands hashtag had evolved into a movement, with veterans posting photos of their medals, their stories flooding X and Instagram. Step Savvy's Veterans Respect initiative was now a national standard, their stores hosting monthly veteran meetups, their CEO touting Hank's story in boardrooms. The mall's bronze plaque by the fountain drew steady visitors, vets leaving mementos, families teaching kids about sacrifice. Hank's name, etched in fine print, was a quiet spark that had lit a fire. On stage, the mayor, a wiry man with a practiced smile, called Hank forward, his voice booming through the speakers. "Henry Sullivan, a Marine who reminded us what honor means, is our guest of honor." The crowd erupted, clapping and whistling, some standing on tiptoes to see. Hank's jaw tightened, his discomfort palpable, but Nathan's hand on his back steadied him. "You've got this, Dad," he whispered. Hank stepped up, his boots heavy on the wooden steps, the Bronze Star catching the light. The mayor handed him a key to the city, a shiny token Hank accepted with a nod, his grip firm but reluctant. "This isn't about me," he said into the mic, his voice gruff, unpolished. "It's about every soldier who didn't come home. Honor them." The crowd roared, many in tears, their applause a wave that crashed over him. Nathan's eyes glistened, his pride a silent anchor. Step Savvy had sponsored the event, their logo on banners fluttering in the wind. Their CEO, a polished woman in a power suit, approached Hank afterward, shaking his hand with practiced sincerity. "Your story changed us, Mr. Sullivan," she said, cameras flashing. Hank nodded, his reply curt. "Hope it changed more than your bottom line." She blinked, then smiled, but the crowd's murmurs showed they'd heard. Nathan suppressed a grin, his father's bluntness a familiar fire. The company had donated $100,000 to a local VA, a gesture Hank appreciated more than the ceremony's pomp. He slipped away from the stage, letting Nathan handle the reporters. Their questions about the Colonel of Justice met with his usual refrain. "It's about respect, not me." Back home, Hank's farm was quieter now, the harvest done, the fields bare under a November frost. The letters kept coming, hundreds now, stacked in a box by his dresser, from veterans across the country. A Korean War vet wrote of being spat on in '53. A young Afghanistan medic thanked Hank for giving her courage to wear her Purple Heart. He read each one, his hands steady, their words a lifeline to a brotherhood he'd thought faded. The Bronze Star stayed in its case most days, but its story lived in every letter, every nod from a stranger at Earl's diner, every kid who asked, "What was Iraq like?" Nathan's visits were regular now, their bond a steel cable forged in the mall's fire. He'd speak at veteran events, always crediting Hank, his speeches drawing crowds from Denver to D.C. "My father taught me duty," he'd say, his voice steady. "He's the hero here." At Fort Carson, his promotion to full colonel was celebrated with toasts. But Nathan's thoughts were on Omaha, on the porch where he and Hank shared beers under the stars. Sergeant Major Carla Ruiz and Master Sergeant Jamal Carter, now advocates for veteran mental health, carried the story too, their mall roles a proud chapter. At a VA fundraiser, Carter told a crowd, "We stood for a Marine that day. We'd do it again." Tyler Grayson was a memory, scraping by in Fremont, his gas station job a daily grind. The memes had faded, but the lesson hadn't. He kept a worn article about Hank clipped from a local paper, hidden in his wallet, a reminder of the man he'd wronged. He'd written an anonymous apology, mailed to Hank's farm, but never heard back. He didn't expect to. The Bronze Star's meaning, once a mystery, now haunted him, a mirror to his own smallness. Hank's community kept evolving. The 4-H kids made him an honorary member, their leader citing his courage under fire. At their spring fair, they gave him a plaque, smaller than the mall's but heavier with sincerity. Hank hung it in his barn, next to a photo of Nathan in uniform. The VA clinic named a wing after him, funded by Step Savvy's donation, and Hank cut the ribbon, his discomfort outweighed by the vets who shook his hand, their eyes saying what words couldn't. As the ceremony ended, Hank and Nathan walked through the park, the crowd's cheers fading behind them. A young boy, clutching a flag, ran up. "Are you the medal guy?" he asked, eyes wide. Hank knelt, his knees creaking. "Just a Marine, son, like a lot of folks here." The boy grinned, saluting clumsily. Hank returned it, his heart full. The Bronze Star, once a private vow, was now a beacon, its story inspiring a nation to remember. Hank stood, Nathan's hand on his shoulder, and they walked on, father and son, their legacy enduring. The sun dipped low over Hank Sullivan's Nebraska farm, casting long shadows across the cornfields, now green with early summer growth. It was a year and a half since the Willow Creek Mall incident, but its echoes still reverberated, not just in Omaha but across the country. The story of Hank and Nathan Sullivan had become a cornerstone of American veteran culture, a tale of defiance and redemption told in VFW halls, shared on social media, and etched into the collective memory of a nation grappling with its debt to those who served. The Bronze Star, tucked in its velvet case on Hank's dresser, was no longer just a private tribute to Tommy Ramirez and Fallujah's fire. It was a symbol of resilience, a spark that had ignited a movement. Hank, now 74, moved slower these days, his arthritis fiercer, but his spirit burned bright, fueled by a purpose he'd thought lost. The hashtag #HonorStands movement had grown into a force, with veterans and civilians alike posting stories of service on X, their medals gleaming in photos tagged with Hank's name. Schools taught the incident in civics classes, teachers asking students, "What does respect mean?" Podcasts with millions of listeners dissected it. One host calling Hank, "the Marine who woke America up." Step Savvy's Veterans Respect initiative had reshaped retail, their model adopted by chains like Target and Dick's Sporting Goods, each store now hosting veteran job fairs and discount days. The mall's bronze plaque by the fountain was a national landmark, featured in travel blogs as a must-see for patriots. Visitors left flowers, coins, even folded flags, turning the spot into a shrine for sacrifice. Hank's farm was a hub of quiet activity. The letters, thousands now, filled boxes in his spare room, each one a story of service, loss, or gratitude. A World War II vet wrote of Normandy's beaches. A young Iraq medic shared her PTSD struggles, thanking Hank for giving her courage. He answered as many as he could, his handwriting shaky but deliberate, each reply a bridge to a brotherhood that spanned generations. The local 4-H club had made him their unofficial mascot, inviting him to every event. At their summer fair, They unveiled a scholarship in his name, funded by community donations, for kids of veterans. Hank, gruff as ever, choked up as he handed the first check to a shy girl whose dad had served in Kandahar. "Keep studying, kid," he said, his voice rough. She hugged him, and the crowd cheered, cameras flashing. Nathan Sullivan, now a full colonel at Fort Carson, carried his father's legacy into his command. He'd become a sought-after speaker, addressing veteran rallies from Texas to Virginia, always redirecting praise to Hank. "My father showed me what it means to stand," he'd say, his voice steady. "Even when the world tries to knock you down." His troops at Fort Carson revered him, the mall incident a legend that inspired discipline and pride. Sergeant Major Carla Ruiz and Master Sergeant Jamal Carter, now leading veteran mental health programs, told the story at VA conferences, their roles in the showdown a point of honor. "We didn't need to speak," Carter said at a Seattle event, his deep voice resonating. "The colonel's fire was enough." Ruiz nodded, adding, "And Hank's strength started it all." Hank and Nathan had started a small foundation, the Sullivan Fund, using donations from the viral aftermath to buy essentials, shoes, coats, wheelchairs, for struggling vets. The first recipient, a young Iraq vet named Marcus, wept when Hank handed him a pair of sturdy boots at the Omaha VA. "Keep walking, son," Hank said, echoing Nathan's words from that day at the mall. "You're not alone." Marcus saluted, his eyes bright, and the moment spread online. Another thread in the #HonorStands tapestry. The fund grew, supported by step-savvy and local businesses, its impact reaching vets in a dozen states. Tyler Grayson was a distant memory, scraping by in Fremont, his gas station job a grind. The memes had faded, but the article about Hank stayed in his wallet, a quiet reminder. He'd sent that anonymous apology, never expecting a reply, and Hank hadn't sent one. But Hank kept the letter, tucked in a drawer, a sign that even the worst mistakes could spark change. Tyler volunteered at a local shelter now, serving meals to vets, his silence a kind of penance. He'd never be the man Hank was, but he was trying one step at a time. Hank's community had woven him into its heart. Earl's Diner hung a photo of him and Nathan, captioned "The Sullivans." Honor stands. The VA Clinic's Sullivan Wing, funded by StepSavvy, was a haven for vets, its walls lined with letters thanking Hank. At a town hall, the mayor declared June 15th, Hank's birthday, Henry Sullivan Day, a move Hank protested but couldn't stop. Kids sent him drawings of Marines, their crayons capturing the Bronze Star's shine. Hank pinned them to his barn, next to Nathan's old Little League trophy. One evening, Hank and Nathan sat on the porch, the summer air thick with fireflies. Beers in hand, they watched the horizon, the cornfield swaying under a crescent moon. "You changed things, Dad," Nathan said, his voice soft. "Not just for us, for everyone." Hank shrugged, his eyes on the stars. "You lit the match, Nate. I just held the torch." They laughed, the sound carrying across the fields. The Bronze Star, in its case, rested quietly, its story alive in every heart it touched. The legacy endured. The Sullivan Fund grew, StepSavvy's model spread, and #HonorStands became a call to action, inspiring laws to protect veterans' dignity. Hank, slowing but unbowed, kept answering letters, speaking to kids, standing for those who couldn't. Nathan, leading with his father's fire, ensured the story lived on. As they sat, father and son, the world turned, carrying their stand into history, a reminder that honor, once defended, never fades. Thank you for joining Endless Stories on this journey with Hank and Nathan Sullivan. A tale of honor, loyalty, and unbreakable resolve. If this story stirred your heart, if you believe honor and family are worth defending, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell to catch every inspiring tale we share. Drop "Honor Stands" in the comments below. Share this video with those you hold dear, and join us in spreading the undying spirit of heroes. Until our next story, keep the flame of honor burning bright.